They go hand in hand. They support each other and they compete with each other. Those who have money have power, a certain type of power. That power has to do with all that they can buy, but it also has the ability to influence those with political power. So, and so you see this throughout history, this symbiotic relationship, for example, between the royal families, the nobility, and the church. So you see that group of people supporting each other in various ways and then wrestling around with each other for the money and power among that group. So the dynamic that's quite classic is you could look at the parties in power back in the 16th, 17th centuries. You would look at royal families, nobles, and the church, if you're in Europe. And then you would look at agricultural land, and there was a certain dynamic. And that varies over time. It changes as those people get thrown out and technology changes. So when the society evolved so that it would produce goods and services, and you have something like the Industrial Revolution, the first Industrial Revolution. You have machines, and you have the talent of people that are off the farms, and then you have a struggling for power. You see that power mix change. And so we don't see that same power mix anymore, but you still see the same dynamic. You see those with money dealing with those who have political power around those assets that are considered most valuable, to particularly the productive assets that produce money. All of those indicators are concerning, maybe except for one, which is technology, the technology niche, although even in that area, the United States is improving at a slower rate than is China for various advantages that they have there. They put out about 8 times as many computer engineers. They have free data and so on. But if you look at them, so the financial is a concern. The internal disorder is a concern. Then if you look at education levels, the United States is in many ways is losing its educational advantage. If you were to compare it with China, if you take general public education in the United States, it's deteriorated tremendously, even in comparison to developed countries. There are PISA scores and so on, and it's something like 38th in the world or something, and that was a big plunge. Average public education. If you look at the best universities in the world, the United States is unique in having the best universities in the world. So there are these privileged spots that are excellent, uniquely excellent. So when you look at the comparison, education in China is improving rapidly, and the quantity of educated people in the areas that they're moving in is greater, and the resources that they're putting behind it is greater, and so you see the results are greater. But it's sort of along the lines that I'm dealing with. If you were to follow through in terms of actual productions, I think in terms of technologies, there are some areas that the United States is in a lead at the moment. There's some areas that China's in a lead, but China's gaining very quickly. When I first went to China, 1984, I would bring $10 calculators, and I gave them away as gifts to high-ranking people, and they thought they were miracle devices. Right now, in terms of areas like quantum computing and AI and many areas, you have a race going on. And so if you take the trajectory of the competitiveness, not just look at the current level, you have a situation where they're improving at a much faster rate. This is all good for the world if the world can get along. And the main thing, I think, is in how do you have a healthy world, and how do you have a strong economy, and how do you have a strong situation, is be strong. The United States' war is with itself. That's the main war. It's very simple in history. be financially sound, earn more than you spend, and be strong in these ways, and pretty much everything will take care of itself. And there are circumstances that you're then in. For example, indebtedness. It's politically desirable for those to borrow money and spend, because their constituencies only look at what they get. And when they get a lot, they don't pay attention to the balance sheet and how much debt is on the books. So it's always better to borrow, spend, and then leave the cleanup to the next guy. And so you inherit a lot. You inherit it as a new president enters in, or a new legislator. They have a lot of debt. They have a broken down infrastructure. They don't have enough money to fix that. And so that's the lay of the land that the prior generations put you in. And there you are. And so that's right. It's difficult, because when you start to think, okay, what's healthy? Well, then earn more than you spend. Well, that's not so easy, because, what does that mean? Go earn more? Okay, that's not so easy. Spend less? That isn't going to work. So now what do? Okay, you have this debt that you then monetize, and that's why it's classic. So yes, that's why these cycles occur, because what happened before created the lay of the land that is then increasingly difficult to deal with. Well, I completely agree with your list. What we have is a situation where everybody has their opinions, and they have to sort of get them exactly right, and they all fight with each other about whether their opinions. So the most important thing is that we become bipartisan, so that we get over our differences. I would have a bipartisan cabinet. I would draw upon both members of both parties, the moderates, who are going to be able to work together, so as then we have one country, and then we deal with those in a means that works for the majority of the people in the middle, rather than the polarity. I think our greatest risk is in not being able to do that. So I would say that's paramount importance, because we have the resources, wealth, real wealth, and science and everything has never been better than it is. But the notion is that it has to work for the majority of people, and we have to keep it being productive. And that group has got to calmly and knowledgeably work together so that they increase the size of the pie and they create broad-based prosperity. So that is of paramount importance. Whatever they do, if they do it that way, I can say I'm happy about, because that other alternative is the really scary alternative. Evolution is in a direction toward improvement, and the greatest force is man's capacity to adapt and invent. And so you see in the charts in the book, you see that this upward movement, life expectancy, health, all the things that we think are better. You see there's a chart, and it shows that over a period of time, and you barely see the downturns from depressions and wars in that. That is the greatest power. Man's ability to invent and adapt is evolution, and that's the greatest power, and that is what gives me justifiable hope. My time horizon isn't, I hope so, and I agree that would